Remember I talked about the idea there were two sorts of journeys, if you like. There were the journeys that companies would like you to go on as a customer, what I think of as company pathways.
Welcome to the ECXOT sessions, where business people meet and people meet with Dr. Graham Hill. ECXOT sessions is a high-value CX-related presentations for our community to help European corporate in young CX, EX, and transformation. If you want to talk in the ECXOT sessions, you just have to come on board and let us know, and you can participate and show your craft, your company, because we're very interested in companies to understand the history of the companies and what they are doing about CX. That's what defines the history. In our panel today, we have Joanna Carr, which is enlightening all of us and is an emerging light in the CX environment in Europe. In the business world, okay, and she's talking first from Norway today. She lives there actually, and I am the co-founder and founder of the CXO with another 27 ambassadors, and we created those sessions to really give the opportunity for the members and for the guests and for people that want to talk about CX. Things that are very actual right now to help the community to grow and to help the community to get more information for people doing that in everyday life. And now our guest. Let me introduce you for Graham here. Oh, I forgot to say something. The ECXO is an open access community, okay? So you just have to go there and subscribe. It's very easy for individuals. Graham Hill has over 30 years of experience as a consultant, interim director in the telecom, financial services, and other industries. Currently, he is advising a major UK telco on developing its machine learning, interaction personalization, and journey orchestration capabilities as a part of the multi-million euros digital transformation program. He is also a senior advisor for the ECXO, and Graham is a director at Optima Partners. So without further ado, Graham Hill. Graham, you can load the presentation, as always yours.
I shall do so. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for that stunning introduction. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. We have about 30 minutes of this webinar. And I want to talk during that time about four things. I want to talk a little bit about the state of CX today, in particular, bearing in mind we're in the middle of a long-term COVID pandemic, and that has changed behavior. Or indeed, has it changed behavior? I want to talk a little bit about the foundations of journey orchestration, so the things that are the fundamentals that drive journey orchestration. I then want to talk about a simple structure, if you like, for implementing a journey orchestration proof of concept in 90 days. This is based on my own experience over many, many years, doing proof of concepts and minimal viable programs applied to journey orchestration. And right at the end, just to make things a little bit more exciting, and I want to talk a little bit about what I think is coming next on top of journey orchestration, what we can see in the future, some of which is already here today. So the first of those things is this question around, does CX really work? So this picture is taken from Marketing Week editorial from a couple of weeks ago. And it's based around a survey run every year by KPMG Nunwood looking at CX. They look at about 10K customers, and from my view for the UK, this is by far and away the best CX study that I see every year. One thing we've seen this year for the first time is that since 2017, this is the first time we've had a fall in the CX scores, in this case about 1%. So things aren't going quite as well as they were until recently. And if you look at the people who are the winners in terms of the best scores, companies like Starling Bank and Lush and John Lewis, many of these companies, in fact, all the new entrants, with 10 new entrants to the survey, all of them are digital companies. And if you look at the winners, the ones who've come out the best this year, they are either all digitally oriented or they are ESG oriented, so to do with environmental sustainability. But obviously, as you recognize, we're in the middle of the pandemic. COVID has changed everything. When we started the COVID pandemic a couple of years ago now, started with lockdowns, panic buying, people didn't go to the shops at all because they couldn't, or they had to queue outside. I experienced several times fights in shops over the last packet of pasta, over the last thing of eggs. But of course, we learn and adapt. So in the medium term, we started satisficing. So we started stopping going out for restaurants and all those optional things that we don't need to do. But we continue to shop for other things, but we increasingly shopped online. So we have the growth of digital, and as we can't do everything online, we have the growth of omnichannel. And omnichannel and digital in particular are a key component of how we think about journey orchestration going forward. Now we see changes in behavior. We've all changed our behavior in one way, shape or form. But the question is the change of behavior permanent or is it not permanent? And only time will tell. One of the key messages coming out of that is we're now entering what I think of as our digital destiny. So the KPMG Nunwood study identified that they estimate around 60% of all interactions with companies today are driven by digital. Gartner puts it around 80%. And I think Gartner's probably somewhere in between the two. Between 60 and 70, 80% of interactions are digital ones with companies. And as we think about the implementation of 5G and IoT and edge-based processing and the introduction of new services like the augmented reality we can see in the picture, then that digital footprint will only cause to increase over time. And of course, this digital footprint leaves an enormous data trail. And that's a critical foundation for journey orchestration, as we'll see in a minute. So what about the foundations? What about the things we need to think about? What are the fundamentals that we need to think about when we think about journey orchestration? So although a lot has changed, some things haven't. What we know about jobs to be done, a fundamental approach to looking at foundations of journey orchestration, although things have changed around COVID, our fundamental jobs haven't changed. We still want to listen to music. We still want to do all those other sorts of things. All we've done is change how we go about it. So it's the same jobs, but different emphasis, different tools we're using. And we have our functional jobs, obviously, listen to music. We also have emotional and social jobs as well. How we want to be, how we want to see ourselves, how we want to be seen by others. And there are a number of associated jobs as well. So in the case of music, as well as listening to music, I also want to organize my music. I want to share my music. I want to port my music with me. All things we can do using technologies today. So jobs, customer jobs, are a foundational component of when we think about journey orchestration. But if you think about it, when we have jobs to be done, we interact with other companies, so friends and family, companies, others, to get access to resources to do those jobs. So this idea of interacting to get resources, that's the definition of a service in many ways. If you look at the academic definition of a service, it's providing resources for the benefit of another. So we interact with companies to get access to resources, and those sequences of interactions are our journeys. Put all those journeys together, we have an experience, an end-to-end experience. And this is really the foundation of CX and the foundation of journey orchestration. But it's about functional jobs. At the same time as interacting with companies, we also receive an experience at the same time. The two are inextricable. You can't have a service and not experience a service at the same time. So although the emphasis is on the service and designing the service, because that's what we go to companies for, we also need to think about the experience we have at the same time. And that's about those emotional and social jobs that we've talked about a second ago. But let's stop for a second. This is all great, but how do we get from here to where we want to get to? Now, I think we have a problem to overcome. And that problem is this thing here, that if you look at what we've done in the past, we've relied upon journey maps. So nice, pretty pictures with an idealized flow in an ideal world, that doesn't represent anything realistic at all. In fact, I think there are three fundamental problems with journey maps. First of all, they're unrepresentative. So they only represent a small number of the millions of customers you really have. They're unrealistic. They only represent an idealized journey, often the journey that you want to have with your company, rather than the journey customers want to go on themselves, bearing in mind they might be different. And of course, because they're so high level, they're literally unimplementable in the technologies we're going to have to use to do journey orchestration. So if journey maps are dead, what are we going to replace them with? And I think there are two things. The first of those is this one I think of as the yin of journey analytics. So we talked about all this data exhaust, so we need a data trail we leave behind. So we can use that data, we can collect that data and transform and merge and match it together. So we can identify what real customers do on their real journeys, not the idealized blue sky versions in journey maps, but real customers and real journeys. We can use tools like Thunderhead. This is a screenshot provided by courtesy of Thunderhead to me to use on the presentation, to be able to pull in that data, to analyze the data, identify the journeys that people really go on. And we could talking about millions or tens of millions of interactions that we can analyze, many orders of magnitude more that we can deal with in a journey. So this is the foundation of journey orchestration. But at the same time, we need the yang as well, and that yang is journey orchestration itself. We create a visual representation of how those real customers go on their real journeys. That allows us to do a whole variety of things. It allows us to advise what interactions customers really carry out to get the jobs done. It allows us to identify the flow of interactions, which interactions are preceded or followed by other interactions. It allows us to identify decision points where customers have to decide, do we go down this route or do we go down that route? And how does it interact how does it interact with them getting to the end of their journeys, where they get the thing they want done faster, easier, and better. And of course, from our perspective, it allows us to identify triggers for action, because journey orchestration isn't about journey analytics alone. It's about triggering actions in the market that help customers get to their end point, get their jobs done faster, easier, and better. And of course, allowing us to get our jobs to be done faster, easier, and better. And they're often sales and service jobs. But it isn't only about technology. Technology isn't enough by itself. I always use the expression, the algorithm, if you like, very simple algorithm, OO plus NT equals EOO. So old organization plus new technology equals expensive old organization. So it's not only about technology and data, but it's also about things like processes. How do we restructure our processes to enable better access to be taken to market more quickly? How do we organize our roles? How do we organize journey squads, for example, to be able to do these things? But we need to collaborate with across the business in terms of planning and managing short-term changes and managing IT. How do we build a work system that allows us to perform as a high-performance organization? And of course, last but not least, how do we manage and govern this whole thing? So we need to build a service system around journey orchestration if we want journey orchestration to really deliver the goods that we know, and I'll show you shortly, it can deliver. So I think, based on my experience of doing this sort of work, I think we can get a good proof of concept and minimal viable program, if you like, in the market in as little as 90 days. It won't be an all-singing, all-dancing implementation. It won't even be a pilot. It'll be a proof of concept to show that it can deliver and a stepping stone to develop more things. And I think inside that, there are really 4 phases that we need to think about, or 4 stages. The first 10 days are around planning, around a discovery process. The next 40 days, so day 10 to day 50, are about doing. I'm using the plan, do, check, act cycle that I learned when I was working with Toyota. This is about defining and designing our journey orchestration proof of concept, our MVP. Days 50 to 80 about checking, so it's developing and delivering that into the marketplace and actually getting access into the marketplace. And days 80 to 90 is about acting, so deploying the solutions, which is mostly about learning what we've done in the first 90 days or first 80 days and expanding that out. What I want to do now is very quickly run through, there's a lot of detail we're going to show you in a second. I'm not going to talk about all of it, it could be too time consuming, too mind numbing. I'm just going to pick out a few things, and of course you can the presentation is available for you to download if you want to look in a bit more detail. So the first of those stages is days 0 to 10, the planning process. We start to define what we want to do, the discovery process rather. And I want to highlight 3 things in that process. The first of those is looking at customers. So as an organization, any large organization, we have a whole variety of segments and products and journeys and channels that we can work with. We have to make choices. We can't deal in all of them, so we have to make choices about what's in our proof of concept. So that's the first thing I want you to think about when you're doing the planning process. The second thing is data sources. We talked about a data exhaust. There are many sources of data. Some are easy to get to, some are difficult. Some are high quality, some are low quality. So you need to be very careful about selecting our data sources that we can use for analytics in the next phase, so we can pick up information or data that's valuable and accurate and relevant and so forth, high quality data that helps us to identify trigger points that can drive actions in the market. And the last thing I want to pick up is this thing around roles, about creating a cross-functional work team. This isn't just about IT or data. It's about the business, about marketing, sales and service, depending on which segments you pick up and which journeys you pick up. It's about compliance, because we're going to market various things. We need to involve compliance. There's a whole variety of people we need to pull into a cross-functional work team to make this thing work. So we've done our planning, we've done our first thing. The next stage is thinking about the do stage, developing and delivering this solution. And I want to pick out a couple of things here, but a lot of it's fairly common sense in many ways, but I want to pick out a couple of things. First one is around data and systems. So we've got to get our data together and implement our technologies so that we can identify actions to take to marketplace. This is all about those actions, triggered actions built on the back of journey orchestration, journey analytics. And the second thing is that I want to think about the fact that we need to put in place governance right from the start. So we're doing this in order to drive business performance and obviously drive customer value as well at the same time. So we need to put in place governance that allows us to measure, to monitor, and to manage the results as we're coming along, bearing in mind we're going to be continuously improving this as time goes by. So we've gone through the design and develop process. But I want you to think a little bit about something else as well. And this is this very fundamental thing. It's about data plus insights drives actions, not only about data. So journey analytics will tell you all sorts of things about what people do. They're real people, customers doing real journeys. But it won't tell you why they do them. It won't tell you what else they did, what other interactions they had outside of things you've collected. It won't tell you what they really wanted to do, but you didn't allow them to do so at all. So you need data plus insights through journey research, all that jobs to be done research. Together, those things create much far superior actions, is what we need to get into the marketplace. So it's all about data plus insights driving actions, not just about data. So with that in mind, let's think about the next stage. So now we're getting things into the market, now developing and delivering. So it's about getting that into marketplace. A lot of organizations are going to be doing always-on marketing, for example, and separate to that, going to be doing service messages. And depending on what sort of industry, you're going to be whole right of mandatory messages as well. So we've made our choices about what we want to focus on. So this is about getting stuff in the marketplace. It's learning how to get actions in the marketplace. I worked with a large UK bank. When we started, we were working with about 100 campaigns. By the end of the year, we had about 1,000 actions we want to get into the marketplace. That takes a whole new way of thinking. And that brings this whole idea about measurement, monitoring, and management again, that I talked about a moment ago. The last of these activities, if you like, we've done our planning, we've done our design and definition, we've done our development and delivery. We're in the marketplace, we're running things, we're now at deployment. The last 10 days of our 90-day program, where we're thinking about deployment, about learning and improvement. We're thinking about expanding to different combinations of products and journeys and customers. We're thinking about expanding to different data sources. We're thinking about expanding the range of actions we get in the marketplace, all part of this deployment phase. And of course, we need to think about planning the next MVP. So the first one is a proof of concept. The aim should be to prove this works in the first POC, and then to move into the next iteration, the next 90-day plan, next MVP, learning what we've learned from the first process, the first POC, and then planning the next one as part of that. So the $64,000 question really is, does this work? So I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to take the word of real organizations. So here's three real-world examples provided courtesy of Thunderhead. A sports company, 11 million customers, 3 channels, 22 touch points, huge increases in ticket sales, partner sales, and merchandise sales. These is real, and all done in 75 days. Another example is a telco, 18 million customers, increasing offer response by 18% in 40 days. And the last example, these are real programs and projects run by Thunderhead in this case. So a search company, 5 million customers, significant increases in job alert sign-up, open rates of job alert emails, and click-through rates, an enormous increase, all done in 25 days. But notice, the small numbers of channels and touch points and customers, the faster you go to marketplace. So you might not have 20 million or 50 million customers. You might not be an American Airlines or an AT&T or whatever. You might be a much smaller organization. This works for you as well as it works for large corporations. And the smaller your MVP or POC, the faster you can get it to marketplace and show time to value. We talked a little bit about the background, we talked a little bit about the fundamentals, we've talked about how to get this into market in 90 days. But what comes next? This isn't the end of the story. So what comes next? So I think there are 5 things to think about. One of these is that a lot of times today we're working with corporations or organizations, they have one-size-fits-all monolithic products. But as we start to go towards more granular products, using an object-oriented modular approach, we can mix and match different products and services. So we can start to produce bundled products and so they go into actions in the marketplace. A huge improvement over where we were in the past. I worked with a Greek telco in the past, looking at customer lifecycle management. Our biggest challenge wasn't identifying which action to take to marketplace, it was having appropriate services to offer during these interactions. We only had large bundle modular things. We didn't have any modular services. Today, things are different. If I have modular services, I can start to move away from personalization towards individualization. So a lot of personalization today isn't about customers at all, despite the name. It's about companies. So real-time bidding, hyper-personalization isn't about customers at all. It's about companies. It's about their products and services. As I can start to create modular services, as I allow customers to pick and choose the things they want, the combinations of proposition and incentives and content and what have you, I start to create individualized communication, individualized actions designed for individuals, not for the corporation. That's a huge increase. If I can do those things, I can start to move from interacting with companies, talk about things we want to talk about them, to engaging things, to wrapping human elements of conversation around those interactions, because we're a human species. We interact in a human way. Remember all those emotional and social jobs, they're to do with interaction, to do with the engagement part. If I can use this to drive engagement, to conversation, to drive engagement, I can increase retention, I can increase loyalty, and I can increase sales as a consequence of that. So moving from interactions to journeys to conversations is part of this process. In order to do these things, I need technology, not only journey orchestration technology, but also I need to start to engage machine learning models. So a lot of our journey orchestration tools today are built around Markov models, so models that allow you to predict from where you are today what the next interaction will be. We need to move beyond those things to machine learning, to things like deep reinforcement learning. That means that we can run in a perpetual beta mode, that every action in the marketplace is part of a learning experiment that step by step improves our outcomes in the marketplace and allows us to simulate and run a whole variety of models to allow us to pick the best action, what's the next best action, and what's the next best journey. Bearing in mind that many organizations today, not only providing their own products and services, but those of partners and those of other partners that don't exist today through platforms. We start to move to the area where we start to compete on the speed of learning, which is an idea created by BCG executive Martin Reeves a few years ago. Ultimately, when we put all these things together, think about what we're doing today with journey orchestration analytics, what we can do in the future through modular services, individualization, building engagement through conversations and machine learning. The final nirvana, if you like, something not so far away is moving to this idea of building a self-tuning company. Again, another article written by BCG's Martin Reeves. Companies like Alibaba, other companies, similar to that, use algorithms to make many, many decisions that are today made by people. So we go to a situation where the humans are out of the loop increasingly, or humans are on the loop, to quote an article in HBR recently. We get to a situation where, as in the case of HAL in 2001: Space Odyssey, it's not about "I'm sorry, Dave." It's about "Yes, of course, Dave." So we've talked a little bit about what's the status today. We've talked a little bit about the foundations. We've talked a bit about how to get to market in 90 days and what you can do if you do that, and talked a little bit about where we think that we're going in the future. All I can really say now is thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Graham, for this great presentation. I think the people have some questions here.
Can I stop sharing now?
Yeah, now you are back. I think have questions, and I have also some questions. Go for it, Joanna.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Graham, for your very insightful and interesting presentation. We've got a couple of questions so far in the chat, and please, to everybody out there, if everybody has got a question, then post it in the question and answers. First of all, when we're talking about journey orchestration, is this what we could maybe call the next lead management? Is a question here for you, Graham.
So it's a very good question, actually. If I think about, remember I talked about the idea there were two sorts of journeys, if you like. There were the journeys that companies would like you to go on as a customer, what I think of as company pathways. So let's take credit card onboarding example. So there's certain steps that a credit company would like you to take to onboard you as a credit card user. They want you to sign up for a credit card. They want you to activate the credit card. They want you to use the credit card, and they want you to become your main credit card. And there's a whole bunch of interactions they will want to have with you, irrespective of what you want to do, to onboard you on the credit card. But at the same time, as a credit card user, you have your own journey. It's not a company pathway, it's your customer journey. And the two hopefully will interact with each other. So lead management is a process that companies carry out. It's a journey that companies want to do. So there's no reason why you can't build journey orchestration to implement better lead management. So if you think about it, lead management is about managing large numbers of interactions, potentially with potential customers. They could be new to you, it could be former customers, it could be lapsed customers, whatever it may be. So there's no reason why I can't understand those journeys or pathways, either work fine, to identify the flow of interactions during that lead management process, or an inflection point. Let's say let's take another example. Let's take lead management in automotive. So you go to the manufacturer's website, you browse the website, you go to the car configurator, you can spend 15 minutes configuring your ideal car. Then you go to the financial part of the website and you spend 10 minutes configuring your ideal package, but then you stop. For 10 minutes you don't do anything, or you drop off the website. That's an inflection point. That's an event that's occurred that I can then use to trigger an action. I can call the customer if I know who they are. I can email them. I could use a push notification if they're on the app or on the web. I could often have a chat with customers, whatever's appropriate. So there's no reason why I can't use journey orchestration to orchestrate the lead management journey as much as any other journey as well. So absolutely, use it to whatever purpose you want to do.
Thank you. We've got another question here that says, I'm a fan of journey orchestration, but observe that many companies focus on the reporting part of it in terms of business intelligence, but not really on taking action and delivering a great CX or customer experience. What do you think are the obstacles, Graham?
A question from
From Silvana.
From Silvana, okay. Hi, Silvana. That's a good question, actually. But if we talked earlier on about the yin and the yang of journey orchestration. The yin being analytics, so understanding what customers really do and their journeys they go on, and of course you want to report out of that. And the yang, which is the implementation of the insights you've generated. Remember, data plus insights equals actions. To have the data to create insights, but without going to actions, is a little bit like not really completing your recipe. So you need to do it. So why do we not go any further? A whole variety of reasons. I think often people don't have the right technology. You can't do this without technology. And you need advanced journey orchestration technology, the sorts that like Thunder provides, or Pointillist, or Kitewheel, the top 3 in the recent Forrester survey. If you don't have the right technology, then it's very hard to go toward journey orchestration, but it's relatively easy to do the analytical part and to do the reporting. If you haven't developed your cross-functional team, your Agile journey squads, I described them in the to-do section, or the plan section, or the 90-day section, then you're not going to be able to pull together the right people to be able to identify the actions and the triggers that generate those actions to take them to the marketplace. Creating actions on the back of journeys or data journey analytics is a new thing for many companies. They're used to doing campaigns. Campaigns take 3 to 6 months to get into the marketplace from experience. In some digital actions, I want to be able to get a new action to identify something new going on. I need to respond really, really quickly. I need to get it in the marketplace in 2 or 3 days. That's an enormous change for most large corporations. So they need to develop those agile squads and the capability to be able to do that. There was a survey a few years ago, a report about where the best ideas, best innovations come from. Most innovations, like most programs of work, fail 80% of the time. The absolute best way, with a 95% success rate, which is different to an 80% failure rate for most innovations, was identify what customers want and give it to them really, really fast. That ability to spot opportunities, get the markets really, really quickly, prevents many organizations going to market at all.
Okay. And Graham, you touched on the Agile Squad. Who do you think should actually be part of the Agile Squad?
Okay, that's a bit like asking how long is a piece of string. So I think the answer depends upon, remember in the plan section, the plan part is about deciding. It's about deciding which products you're dealing with, which segments of customers, which channels you want to deal with, and which journeys. And you have to make some careful choices. Otherwise, you bite off too much and you never get everything done. The people you engage in your Agile Squad need to represent those parts of the business and the underlying structure. Need data people, which is data and analytics, 2 different things. You might need people who are data scientists involved as well, for some of the machine learning parts, we use machine learning. You're going to need people who are creating actions. You're going to need people to do measurement and management and monitoring, because that's a key part of the Agile Squad's role as well. You're going to need a squad leader, because there's an Agile Squad. We know how to run Agile Squads as well. And you may need to involve different parts of the business who are part of this process, depending on what it is. So there are some fundamentals around data and technology and actions and so forth, and the rest will depend upon the choices you made at the beginning of your do stage when you're planning your proof of concept, your MVP.
Okay. Thank you. We've got a few more questions coming in here, and I just wanted to mention, Graham, you did say to me that if we don't manage to answer all questions today, then you will personally answer these questions afterwards. But some of these are anonymous, so we'll definitely try and get these anonymous questions first.
And then anybody can read them. And of course, if you want to engage in a dialogue, you know where to find them.
Yeah. As any other technique in the customer experience world, where are the limits to applying these techniques in a business to business world?
B2B.
B2B. Most companies operating in B2B environment don't find the usability, the benefits of such an approach. Do the B2B world have to rising from the customer experience techniques?
Okay, well, it's a good question, and I think it's a very good challenge. So, but I don't think, if I look at the case studies, say from Thunder, which I know quite well, there are one B2B examples there where they've used journey orchestration to orchestrate B2B journeys. Bearing in mind, I have B2B in terms of a decision-making unit making purchases, but I also have a whole lot of users. If I'm a fleet manager running a fleet of vehicles. My job is to run that fleet efficiently and effectively, but I'm going to need a whole lot of information about that fleet in order to be able to manage that. But I also have drivers who are going to be driving those fleets, and there's a whole variety of things I can do using journey orchestration to help them through a connected car type model, for example, to get more value out of their use of a vehicle. So I think, probably not a very good example, but I think generally, although journey orchestration has been traditionally a B2C domain, if I have journeys I go through, if I have lead management, if I have key account management, which has steps and stages and interactions, they're always going to be part of a journey. B2B customers still have jobs to be done, just as retail customers to do. They're just different. If I can understand the jobs to be done, I can understand the interactions they have in their journeys, and how they sequence with each other with the data I have available to me, so the same process we use B2B, then I can construct those into a journey. I can use journey analytics and journey orchestration to be able to identify when an interaction has occurred, whether it's a lead or an existing customer, and to identify what the next best thing I should do, next best action, and to trigger that action. It just requires a little bit different mentality, but the fundamentals are the same. We have customers, they have jobs to be done, they go on journeys, we can collect that data, we can analyze that data, we can identify interactions, we can go to market with actions, whether those things are personal things. Bearing in mind, B2B isn't only large corporates dealing through a DMU, they could also be Soho and small SME customers, where I still, almost like a quasi retail customer, especially for Soho, or I deal with centralized service providers or centralized services for a small SME. So there are all elements of application of journey orchestration. But again, if you have the data, you create a journey, then you can orchestrate it using this technology. And as I said, Thunderhead has examples where they've worked with B2B companies doing exactly this.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, let's move on to the next question. How do we get clients to move? Sorry, Ricardo, did you want to?
I wait.
You can go next.
Right.
How do we get clients to move culturally from the journey mapping view of the world to the real journeys as defined by actual customer journeys as identified by the paths analysis?
Yep, okay, a very, very good question. So, although I think journey maps are dead, I still use them in my work. I don't use them for analytical purposes, I use them for communication purposes. So a communications tool for senior management to illustrate the journeys customers go on and what sometimes goes wrong. Very, very powerful comms tool, but not a good analytical tool. But the question is about how do you move? So we're moving from a craft type environment in a journey mapping group, often a CX group, to bring in more data. So it doesn't need to be a wholesale switch. I mean, there's a whole range of things we can do and see it as an evolution. We can start by adding data to journey maps. So most journey maps are relatively high level. They don't capture much hard data. They don't have much quantification data at all. I can start by the evolutionary process of adding data to my journey maps. But at some point, I'm going to actually start to say, okay, let's see what data we've got available. Let's try and construct journey maps using journey analytics. So I can do the analysis. I can still create journey maps, but this time they are real journey maps. And then I can take an idea. So then I can take all that analytics, all that very big network diagram, that Sankey diagram, and I can abstract out of that the idealized journey, the journey that most customers actually go. So it's a real ideal journey rather than a manufactured one. But remember I said about data plus insights equals actions. And I said very clearly that data by itself is not enough. It's not a case of throwing away journey maps, even though I don't like them personally, I don't use them anymore except for communications. It's a case of analyzing data, identifying real journeys, and then augmenting that with all that information you need about customers' jobs, the interactions, why they have those interactions, because you can't work that out from the data itself, they only tell you what interaction you've had. What other interaction they had with others that you don't know about, which you can get from that, and also what interaction would they have liked to have had, but you didn't provide them. So I think it's an every process of starting with your journey maps, endpoint journey analytics, adding more data to your journey maps to the process, and at some point switching from emphasis on journey maps with data added to emphasis on customer data journey analytics with insights added. It's an evolutionary process. The best way to make a switch is to have a burning bridge to stand on. If you want to get people moving away from journey maps, the ideal thing is to find a POC, an MVP, because I can do journey maps without any technology. I can do them on Excel or OmniGraffle or Visio or whatever I want to do. I can't do journey analysis orchestration with that. I need special tools. So find the burning bridge. Find a need in the business to say, I need to be able to manage this journey better. Everybody's dropping off out of the purchase journey. Why is that? Where do they come from? Where do they go to? Why do they drop out? How can I trigger real-time interactions? Find a burning bridge, identify the technology you want to use, create a POC, and learn by doing. In the process, you'll very quickly, people realize these journey maps are great, they look really pretty, but they're useless. But the insights and the journey maps from journey research are a fantastic addition to make sense and to annotate your journey analytics. So it's a gradual switch.
Thank you. Ricardo, do you want to take your question?
Yeah, thank you. So 90 days, perfect. So now you have to manage that. As in managing during orchestration, based on your presentation, is telling us that this is going to be administrated in all different silos, meaning hopefully they are together already. But how you manage the situation here, because it will be very complex for the company to manage and to bring the data and to get everything done. And we know that when you are running a CX program, that we have many difficulties in getting data and get from something from this department and something, and creating an image for the customer as one company. So my question for you is how you manage after the 90 days to advance forward and to keep that going, because this is a transformation initiative that never went. And that's a great thing, because any transformation never ends. That's true. But what is your take on that, and what's your experience on moving from the 90 days to the practical everyday life from the company?
Yeah.
But this is not clear from this, and that's the reason I'm asking.
That's okay. So in 90 days, all we can really do is a minimal viable program proof of concept. Does this thing work for us? Can we get the data? We pick a small number of channels, a single product, a single customer target group, and we develop those things. The aim being that as we learn how to do this, as we learn how to handle the data, as we learn what the hell is journey analytics and how do we use it, as we learn how do we orchestrate journeys, how do we identify actions of data to marketplace, etc.
That's understood. That's understood. The only thing that I ask you is how you expand that later for all the company.
That's fine. I'm getting to that point.
Okay, all right.
So having done my MVP, we're going through a series of iterative improvements. So after my first MVP, the next point, remember I talked about learning and expanding as part of the act process. The next thing is to say, okay, so I've learned how to do this for this customer segment, this product, this channels, etc. Now I can start to say, how do I expand to other channels and or locations within those channels? I can then say, what have I learned? How can I expand to other parts of the journey for the same product and the customer? How can I expand to different products? How can I expand to different customer groups, etc.? So it's a series of step-by-step improvements, a series of continuous MVPs, each of which builds on the previous one, builds our capabilities. It's a three-stage design process. When I design an MVP, I'm looking to do three things. I'm looking to develop capability that I can then reuse in the next MVP by adding to it. I'm looking to get things in the marketplace so I can learn by doing in the marketplace, because as the old saying goes, there are no facts inside the building, they're all in the market. So you only learn by going to market. And the final thing is I'm trying to build MVPs that are purposely designed to learn things I don't know now, that I will need to know to plan my next MVP. So I would normally create a roadmap over 2 to 3 years for this program to expand out of the whole corporation. We go forward MVP by MVP, expand in different areas as well. Managing change, building out those complementary capabilities. We know how to manage all this stuff. This is classic change management stuff.
So the initiative will take plus minus. So it's a huge project. It's not a program that you do that in 1 year. It will be for a corporate 3-4 years. Sorry?
If you only have a small number of products and customer segments and channels, it's going to take less than if you have 10 or 5 channels and 50 products and 50 million customers. That's going to take a little bit longer. But it's a journey of learning. And inside that, I think Joanne and Mark talked about culture change. Inside of this, a huge cultural shift, which requires organizational change management. That shift is to going away from campaigning, a campaigning mentality. So I've got a product to sell, give me 10,000 customers, because I know that 100 would buy with a 0.1% response rate, to every valuable customer. What's the next best product, service, or interaction for that customer? That switch from product to customer comes over time as we start to show that journey orchestration through the MVP process works. So I've seen the work that I've done over the years in other programs shows that it does work. Every company is a little bit different.
And just to close my question, and one of the difficulties that we have, I think everybody have this difficulty to get the right data from the data scientists and to extract the right data about the customers. What is the work that you have to do here to get this thing done? Because this will be the basic, I think, the backbone of your initiative. So how you get people to bring the right data? Because that's many B2B companies have this difficulty today. And I give you 1 million examples.
Many companies, not only B2B, but all companies of all types have this challenge. Often they don't know what data they have in the first place. So, but this is this is not a difficult problem to solve. It's a problem that we solve all the time as part of becoming a data-driven organization. So it's identifying data sources. So if you think back to 2018, we had to, in Europe and the rest of the world followed more or less, had GDPR to implement. So I ran GDPR for a UK telco as part of that time. Part of the activities that were done before the GDPR program really got moving, but as part of the program as well, as we really did get a space, is to carry out an audit of all the data sources we had. We found we had almost 1,000 data sources around the organization. So knowing what data sources you have, know what data they contain. Part of the planning process, identifying based upon your selection of product, segment, and journey and channel, is to identify what data you need and where's it going to come from. Then you have the problem of auditing that data to assess quality and getting access to the data. So in the quickest of POCs, you might take a flat file with a CSV separation so that you can basically pick up data. Very laborious, not scalable. But to get started with a POC, where you learn about the data and develop your APIs, or put things into a single data repository like a data warehouse and provide extraction mechanisms, then you might start with flat files for your POC. Over time, you move to APIs. You might have it as part of a cloud or other data warehouse that is always available. You then need to do sorts of analytics around identifying how you construct analytical records for the individual interaction to make things go really, really fast. It's all steps and stages that any data manager, data ops person, and any data analyst and or data scientist will understand very, very well. If you have those people on your team, you know what data you've got a good start. But this is a topic for another seminar. About another webinar.
We get to the next one. Go forward, Joanna. I'm sorry to take so much time, but was something I want to listen your take on that. Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very important question. I actually heard that we actually analyze about 0.5% of all data collected is the situation today, according to EDC.
I think that could be. Another thing to think about is that data decays. So I always think that data decays at a roughly 5% decay rate per month for some data. So if you think about it, after 10 months, your data is half of it is decayed. It's no longer worth anything. So data needs to be fresh. You need to take account of decay rates of data as part of your data analytics and ingestion process. But then once you build APIs or your data warehouse or your cloud environment, data is continuously available through real-time event streams, for example. So I've always got the freshest data, then I'm just managing those event streams to identify triggers, and trigger actions as part of journeys that we can manage coherently and holistically.
Mm-hmm. There is a question there from Payne.
Yes.
What's the whole? Go for it.
Okay. What's the role of unstructured data and sentiment analysis in Joe? Does it help the system to recognize the customer and NBR, NBO?
I'm not sure what NBR is next. I'm assuming next best offer. But let's take it as NBA as an overall thing.
Okay.
So unstructured data. So if you think about the types of data, I always think of the 4 types of data, and you know this as well as I do, Joanna. So I have my third-party data, the first-party data stuff that I collect when I'm interacting with customers, second-party data from my partners, third-party data from CDPs and what have you. The data I really want is contextual data, and that's usually zero-party data. That's unstructured stuff that are owned by customers that we don't know about. That data is often on the edge when we're interacting with customers rather than in the center in our databases. So getting access to unstructured data, zero-party data, is a fundamental challenge that we have. When we start with our MVP, it's unrealistic, I think, to look at unstructured data because it's too complicated, difficult. There's too much challenges from a data and analytics and data management and data analytics perspective. We get into an MVP, we only have 90 days, don't forget. So we're probably going to start with first-party data and maybe a little bit of third-party and what have you. As we expand into subsequent MVPs, so we expand into new channels, what have you, and expand into more sources of data, then I'm going to pick up second-party data from partners if I can get hold of it. Going on GDP always applies, so I have to be very careful about picking up external data. And I'm going to start to think about zero-party data as well, which is the unstructured stuff. So I can get some online, but as we know, as the old saying goes, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. All the stuff we see on the internet, on Twitter and what have you, there's a tiny, tiny fraction that is often unrepresentative of your customers. So we have to be very careful about picking up unstructured data from the internet, for example. To get to my original point and to go back to the original question, zero-party contextual data is the real heart of future Joe. But the MVP will be probably too difficult. It's probably MVP 2, MVP 3, maybe MVP 4. But if we can get hold of that data and we can integrate it and go through the usual analytical process and incorporate it into, particularly as insights into the journey analytics to inform things we know that customers do, it becomes a very, very powerful context. I mean, if you want to know about zero-party data, Nora Bateson is the person to look at on the internet. She has a whole institute and a whole load of other stuff to look at. This is the regional source that I would go to. Think about zero-party data. So extremely good question, but a little bit too advanced for the MVP POC in the first 90 days.
Next presentation, we answer that better. Yeah, and we're going to be there. So
yeah,
you are going to be there in the next presentation.
Yeah, my apologies, Payam. I see that Joe was, of course, your shortening of journey orchestration. My apologies, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, Bram, I have a question for you before we go. Tell us how the people can find you. What's the best way? I think you told me LinkedIn, but please tell your ways that you want to be approached.
So the answer's there. So find me on LinkedIn. You'll recognize the picture. Find me at my corporate address, optimalpartners.co.uk. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I will do my damnedest best to respond to you quickly. I can't promise anything because I'm rather busy at doing lots of other things as well. But reach out to me and engage in conversation through LinkedIn or directly through email.
Perfect. Joanna, do you want to say some last words or should we stop here?
Yeah, I can say some last words. First of all, thank you, Graham, for a very interesting and webinar or talk. And it's so exciting to hear of new ways of doing things. I think that this is something that we know is customer experience is evolving, which of course is why we have the European Customer Experience Organization, because we want to evolve together. So a huge thank you from the team in the European Customer Experience Organization. Ricardo, do you have some last words?
Yes, thank you so much, Graham, for your time. Thank you, everyone that was here. Thanks, Joanna. Okay, have a great week. And I think in January or February, we will have a continuation of this conversation that started now with Graham. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you all very much indeed.